At exactly 11:43 p.m. on a quiet Thursday night in October, a security camera mounted above the entrance of a small convenience store in Stockton, California, captured a sequence of images that would later haunt investigators, devastate a family, and permanently alter the way the community understood safety, surveillance, and justice. The footage showed a young woman stepping through the automatic glass doors, her phone pressed lightly against her ear, her posture relaxed, her face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights overhead, completely unaware that she was walking into the final minutes of her life. Outside, rain dripped steadily onto cracked pavement, neon reflections shimmered across puddles, and traffic passed without hesitation, as though the world itself had no idea that it was about to witness a tragedy in real time. Less than 4 minutes later, the same camera recorded her collapsing onto the cold tile floor, her body crumpling without warning, while a shadowy figure moved swiftly out of frame and disappeared into the darkness beyond the parking lot. No screams were heard. No dramatic struggle unfolded. No clear face appeared. Just a blur of motion, a sudden fall, and a silence so unsettling that viewers who would later watch the footage described feeling physically ill as they realized they were witnessing a murder that had occurred inches from everyday life, recorded in high definition, yet somehow destined to remain unresolved. Before we continue, if stories that expose hidden truths, reveal haunting mysteries, and challenge everything we believe about justice and safety matter to you, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because every week we bring you deeply researched, emotionally powerful cases like this one that deserve to be remembered and examined. The victim was 26-year-old Hannah Mitchell, a nursing student, part-time barista, and the eldest daughter in a close-knit family that had lived in Stockton for generations. Friends described her as compassionate, stubbornly optimistic, and fiercely protective of those she loved, someone who volunteered at free clinics and routinely stayed late to help classmates prepare for exams. On the night she was killed, Hannah had finished an exhausting 12-hour shift at a local hospital and stopped by the convenience store to pick up snacks and pain relievers for her younger brother, who was homesick. It was an ordinary act of kindness, a simple errand performed countless times before, one that should never have placed her in danger. Store records showed that Hannah entered at 11:39 p.m., browsed briefly, purchased a bottle of water and 2 packs of medicine, and exited at 11:42 p.m., only to pause just outside the entrance as though responding to a message or call. Investigators would later focus intensely on this moment, replaying it frame by frame, searching for any indication of who she was speaking to, what she had been told, and whether that interaction had unknowingly led her into harm's path. Her phone records revealed an incoming call from an unregistered number moments before she stopped, a call that lasted exactly 36 seconds and was never answered again. What happened next unfolded partially within view of the camera, and partially in frustrating, incomplete fragments. A hooded figure approached from the far side of the parking lot, moving with unusual confidence and purpose, never hesitating, never glancing around, as though fully aware of the camera's blind spots. The individual's face remained hidden beneath a baseball cap and dark hood, and although their height and build were visible, the grainy nighttime footage made precise identification nearly impossible. At 11:43 p.m., the figure raised an arm. There was a brief flash of movement, and Hannah staggered backward before collapsing. The attacker fled within seconds, leaving behind no weapon, no personal items, and no immediately usable forensic evidence. When emergency responders arrived minutes later, they found Hannah unconscious with a single stab wound to the upper chest, precisely placed near the collarbone, consistent with professional or highly deliberate intent. She was rushed to the hospital where she had worked only hours earlier, but despite desperate efforts by doctors and nurses who recognized her, she was pronounced dead shortly after midnight. News of her death spread rapidly through the hospital, leaving co-workers stunned and struggling to comprehend how someone so full of life could be gone so suddenly. As detectives began their investigation, they were initially confident that the presence of clear surveillance footage would lead to a swift arrest. After all, they had a timestamp, a location, a visible suspect, and a sequence of events captured on camera. Yet within days, that confidence began to erode. The footage, while emotionally devastating, lacked critical clarity. Facial features were obscured. License plates were unreadable. Reflections distorted movement. Shadows concealed details. The very technology that was supposed to guarantee justice had preserved only fragments of truth. Further analysis revealed something even more disturbing. The attacker appeared to know exactly when Hannah would exit the store, positioning themselves strategically near a blind corner seconds before she emerged. This suggested prior knowledge, either through surveillance, coordination, or inside information. Investigators began exploring whether Hannah had been followed, targeted, or lured, but her social media activity, financial records, and recent communications showed nothing overtly suspicious. No threats, no disputes, no known enemies, no signs of fear. Her family, struggling to make sense of the violence, insisted that Hannah had never mentioned feeling unsafe or being harassed. Her boyfriend, co-workers, and closest friends all described her as cautious and alert, someone who avoided risky situations and trusted her instincts. Yet something had convinced her to pause outside that store at precisely the wrong moment, placing her within reach of someone who had been waiting. From a behavioral analysis perspective, experts noted that the killer's calm approach, precise strike, and immediate escape pointed towards someone who had rehearsed the act mentally, if not physically. This was not a crime of random rage. It was controlled, focused, efficient. Whether motivated by obsession, revenge, or something darker, the individual had arrived prepared to kill and prepared to vanish. As weeks passed without an arrest, public pressure intensified. Billboards displayed Hannah's face. Community marches demanded answers. National media outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the murder on camera case. Tips poured in by the thousands, yet each promising lead dissolved under scrutiny. Alibis checked out. Sightings proved unreliable. Suspects were cleared. The killer remained invisible. Then, nearly 6 months into the investigation, detectives uncovered a hidden detail buried deep within Hannah's phone data that suggested she may have been communicating with someone under a false identity in the weeks before her death, someone who knew her routines far better than anyone realized. And what that discovery revealed would force investigators to reconsider everything they thought they knew about this case. Before we move into the secret communications, the suspect hiding in plain sight, and the shocking twists that followed, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below, because your support helps ensure that stories like Hannah's continue to be told and pursued. When detectives finally gained full access to Hannah Mitchell's digital records, nearly 6 months after her murder, they believed they were opening the door to long-awaited clarity. By that point, physical evidence had yielded almost nothing, eyewitness accounts had contradicted one another, and the surveillance footage had been analyzed so many times that investigators could recite every frame from memory. Digital evidence, therefore, represented the last major frontier, the final hidden space where the truth might still be concealed. What they discovered was not what anyone expected. Buried beneath thousands of routine messages, social media notifications, and work-related emails was a folder containing encrypted chat conversations linked to an anonymous messaging application that Hannah had installed only 3 months before her death. The account was registered under a randomly generated username, and the messages were automatically set to delete after 30 days, which meant that only fragments remained. Yet even those fragments were enough to immediately alarm investigators. The conversations showed that Hannah had been communicating regularly with someone who identified himself only as Aiden. He claimed to be a freelance photographer who had discovered her social media profile and admired her volunteer work. At first, the exchanges were polite, cautious, and superficial, consisting of compliments, discussions about career goals, and shared interests in music and travel. Over time, however, the tone shifted. The messages became more personal, more emotionally intense, and more dependent. Aiden began expressing concern over her relationships, questioning her choices, and subtly positioning himself as someone who understood her better than anyone else. Behavioral analysts immediately recognized the pattern. This was classic emotional grooming, a slow process of building trust, dependence, and psychological influence without overt manipulation. The sender had never directly threatened Hannah. He had never made explicit demands. Instead, he had gradually inserted himself into her emotional world, offering support during stressful periods and subtly discouraging her from confiding in others. By the final month of her life, Hannah was confiding in Aiden about arguments with her boyfriend, frustrations at work, and fears about failing her exams. Most disturbing of all, investigators discovered that on the night of her murder, Hannah had exchanged messages with Aiden less than an hour before entering the convenience store. One of the final recovered texts read, "I'm close by. We should talk. It's important." Another followed minutes later. "Just step outside for a second. I'll explain." Suddenly, the reason she had paused outside the store became horrifyingly clear. She had been waiting for someone she trusted. Tracing the account behind Aiden became the task force's top priority. Cybercrime specialists attempted to identify IP addresses, device signatures, and login patterns, but the sender had used layered VPNs, burner phones, and public Wi-Fi networks, leaving behind only fragmented digital footprints. Still, investigators managed to narrow their focus to a cluster of login locations centered around one neighborhood, Riverside Heights, a quiet middle-class area less than 4 miles from Hannah's apartment. Within that area lived someone who, until that moment, had never appeared on the suspect list. His name was Marcus Reynolds. Marcus was 32, worked as an IT support technician for a regional insurance company, and lived alone in a small duplex near the river. On paper, he was unremarkable. No criminal record. No history of violence. No substance abuse issues. He volunteered occasionally at community tech workshops and was known among co-workers as quiet, intelligent, and dependable. To neighbors, he was polite but distant, the type of person who waved politely and returned indoors. What made Marcus relevant was his connection to Hannah. 2 years earlier, he had attended a hospital fundraiser where Hannah was volunteering. Photos from the event showed them standing near the same booth, speaking briefly. Later, co-workers recalled that Marcus had visited the hospital several times under the guise of technical maintenance and had occasionally lingered near the nurse's station where Hannah worked. At the time, no one thought much of it. Hospitals were busy places. Visitors came and went constantly. But digital analysis revealed that Marcus had followed Hannah on multiple platforms using different accounts, some of which had been deactivated shortly before her death. He had liked dozens of her old photos. He had bookmarked her public posts. He had downloaded several of her live stream recordings. He knew her schedule. He knew her favorite coffee shop. He knew her weekend routines. Most chillingly, investigators found that Marcus had expertise in network security, encryption, and anonymization tools, knowledge that matched the technical sophistication behind the Aiden account. When detectives first interviewed Marcus, he appeared cooperative and calm. He admitted that he had met Hannah once at the fundraiser, but denied any further contact. He claimed he admired her work from a distance and followed her social media casually, nothing more. Regarding the anonymous messages, he professed complete ignorance. He insisted he had never used encrypted chat apps and had no reason to harm her. Yet inconsistencies soon emerged. Phone records placed Marcus's device within half a mile of the convenience store on the night of the murder, despite his claim that he had been home watching a movie. His laptop contained remnants of VPN software he had claimed never to use. His browsing history showed searches for untraceable messaging apps and security camera blind spots in the months before the crime. When confronted with this evidence, Marcus's demeanor subtly changed. He became more defensive. His answers grew shorter. He requested a lawyer. From an investigative psychology standpoint, this shift was significant. While not proof of guilt, it indicated heightened stress and awareness of potential exposure. Detectives began building a case around him, convinced that they were finally closing in on Hannah's killer. Then came the breakthrough that nearly ended the investigation. A forensic analysis of Marcus's home computer revealed cached fragments of the Aiden messaging interface. Though incomplete, the code matched the platform used in Hannah's recovered conversations. Additionally, deleted files suggested that Marcus had wiped large volumes of data shortly after her death. To investigators, this looked like a digital cleanup operation. Prosecutors began preparing charges. But just as the case seemed ready to move forward, a devastating complication emerged. Marcus's attorney produced verified documentation showing that Marcus had been hospitalized for severe migraines and neurological symptoms on the night of Hannah's murder, admitted at 10:57 p.m., and discharged at 3:12 a.m. Hospital surveillance footage, medical records, and staff testimony confirmed his presence there during the time of the attack. He had an airtight alibi. The case collapsed overnight. Investigators were forced to confront an impossible contradiction. Marcus appeared deeply connected to Hannah's online life, possessed the technical skills to create Aiden, and exhibited suspicious behavior after her death, yet could not have physically committed the murder. Which meant only one thing. If Marcus was involved, he was not acting alone. Someone else had been waiting in that parking lot. Someone else had wielded the weapon. Someone else had carried out the final act. And that person had never appeared on camera clearly enough to be identified. Further investigation revealed that Marcus had been part of several private online forums dedicated to anonymous role-playing, digital personas, and emotional manipulation games, communities where members sometimes collaborated to create elaborate fictional identities. Within those spaces, he had interacted with multiple users whose real identities were unknown. One of those users had vanished days after Hannah's death. The account was deleted. The IP trail went cold, and no trace of the person behind it was ever recovered. Before we uncover the hidden network, the possible accomplice, and the final twist that shattered Hannah's family's hope for closure, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments, because your engagement helps keep these stories alive and pushes for accountability. When investigators realized that Marcus Reynolds could not have physically killed Hannah Mitchell, despite overwhelming digital connections to her secret online life, the entire foundation of the case was shaken. What had once seemed like a straightforward progression toward justice suddenly transformed into a labyrinth of invisible identities, encrypted alliances, and psychological manipulation networks that operated far beyond the reach of traditional policing methods. The truth, which detectives were only beginning to understand, was that Hannah's murder was not simply the act of one disturbed individual, but likely the final outcome of a much larger and far more sophisticated web of digital deception. Special investigators were brought in from federal cybercrime units to examine Marcus's online activity more deeply. They focused on the private forums and encrypted communities he frequented, spaces that outwardly appeared harmless and even intellectual, but beneath the surface functioned as incubators for anonymous role-playing, emotional experimentation, and psychological control games. In these communities, participants created elaborate alternate identities, sometimes maintaining them for years, and formed secret alliances to manipulate unsuspecting outsiders for emotional validation, entertainment, or power. Within these forums, Marcus had operated under several aliases. One of them, known as North Star, had been especially active in discussions about deep persona immersion, a practice where members would jointly maintain a false identity to make it more believable. Messages recovered from archived servers showed that North Star had collaborated with at least 2 other users in constructing Aiden, sharing writing styles, emotional scripts, and behavioral patterns designed to make the persona appear authentic and trustworthy. In other words, Aiden was not one person. He was a shared creation. Multiple individuals had taken turns communicating with Hannah, shaping her emotional reality, learning her habits, and influencing her decisions, all while hiding behind a single digital mask. Each participant only knew fragments of her life, but collectively, they knew everything. This revelation fundamentally altered the investigation. It meant that the person who lured Hannah outside on the night of her murder might not have been Marcus, but someone else who had access to the shared account. Someone who knew exactly where she would be exactly how to manipulate her into stepping into the darkness, and exactly how long they would have before anyone noticed. Investigators traced every known collaborator linked to North Star, uncovering 5 major accounts that had interacted regularly within the network. 3 belonged to individuals in other states who could be ruled out geographically. 1 had been inactive for over a year, but the 5th account, known as Grey Warden, was different. Grey Warden had logged in repeatedly during the week leading up to Hannah's death. He had been active in planning discussions. He had downloaded shared documents containing details about Hannah's routines. And most critically, his last recorded login occurred less than 2 hours before the murder. Then he disappeared. The account was deleted. Associated emails were abandoned. Payment records for VPN services were terminated. Digital fingerprints vanished as if the person had never existed. Despite months of effort, investigators were unable to identify who Grey Warden really was. Every lead dissolved. Every trail went cold. From a criminological perspective, this represented a catastrophic investigative failure, not because detectives were negligent, but because the system itself was unprepared for crimes rooted almost entirely in anonymous digital collaboration. Law enforcement agencies were structured to pursue physical suspects, tangible evidence, and linear chains of responsibility. What they encountered in Hannah's case was a decentralized psychological conspiracy in which guilt was distributed across multiple invisible actors, none of whom could be definitively tied to the fatal act. Meanwhile, Hannah's family lived inside a different reality. To them, the investigation was not an abstract puzzle. It was a daily reminder that their daughter's life had been reduced to unresolved files and unanswered questions. Her mother kept Hannah's bedroom exactly as it had been on the morning she left for work for the last time. Her father replayed news reports obsessively, searching for signs that authorities had discovered something new. Her younger sister refused to walk past convenience stores after sunset. Each year on Hannah's birthday, they held a small private vigil, lighting candles in their living room and playing her favorite songs, quietly wondering whether the person responsible was watching somewhere, hidden behind another anonymous account, living freely. The case officially went cold 18 months after the murder. The task force was dissolved. Funding was redirected. Files were archived. Yet the story did not end there. In 2024, nearly 4 years after Hannah's death, an independent investigative journalist named Daniel Harper began revisiting cold cases involving digital grooming and anonymous manipulation networks. While researching an unrelated disappearance, he stumbled across references to deep persona immersion forums and noticed disturbing similarities to Hannah's case. Through months of undercover work, Daniel infiltrated several encrypted communities still operating in the shadows of the internet. Using carefully constructed fake identities, he gained access to archived conversations, private logs, and deleted repositories that had escaped law enforcement's reach. What he found was chilling. One hidden server contained fragments of discussions from the original Aiden collaboration group. Among them were conversations that had never been recovered by police. In one exchange, dated 3 days before Hannah's murder, Grey Warden wrote, "She trusts us completely now. If we tell her to step outside, she won't question it." Another message followed, "I'll handle the meeting. You guys stay offline that night." For the first time, there was direct evidence that someone within the network had planned to meet Hannah physically. Daniel forwarded the information to authorities immediately. But by then, it was too late. The digital infrastructure had been dismantled years earlier. Hosting companies had purged old records. IP logs had expired. International servers had been shut down. The trail once again vanished into nothing. No warrant could be issued. No suspect could be named. No arrest could be made. Legally, the evidence was unusable. Hannah's killer remained unknown. From an analytical standpoint, Hannah's case became a landmark example of what experts now call distributed culpability crimes, offenses in which responsibility is fragmented across multiple anonymous participants, making traditional prosecution nearly impossible. No single person commits the entire crime, yet together they create conditions that lead directly to death. Marcus Reynolds, though never charged, lost everything. His reputation was destroyed. He was fired from his job. He moved twice. He withdrew from public life. In interviews years later, he admitted that he had helped create Aiden as part of what he believed was a harmless psychological experiment, never imagining it would escalate into real-world violence. Whether this was genuine remorse or self-preservation remains debated. What is undeniable is that Hannah paid the ultimate price for a game she never knew she was part of. Today, her case is studied in law enforcement academies, digital ethics courses, and cybersecurity conferences as a warning about the lethal consequences of online anonymity and emotional manipulation. It stands as proof that danger no longer needs a physical presence to destroy a life, that predators can operate through screens, scripts, and shared identities, invisible yet devastatingly powerful. And somewhere, perhaps in another city, behind another username, the person who waited in that parking lot may still be watching stories like this, knowing that justice never found him. Before you go, if this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think differently about online relationships, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments, because every engagement helps keep these cases alive and pushes for accountability that the system sometimes fails to deliver. No matter how much time passes, Hannah Mitchell deserves to be remembered not as a cold case, but as a life that mattered, a voice that was silenced, and a truth that still waits to be fully revealed.